Welcome back to the Holistic Monitor. Let's get into it. 5 topics today, and they all connect in ways that will make sense by the end. Your cells have an energy score, and it may replace the BMI. There is something building quietly in the research world that feels like it is about to go mainstream, and it connects directly to everything we talk about here in terms of life energy and self-awareness. Scientists are seriously discussing whether a metric called the Bioenergetic Health Index could become the next major diagnostic benchmark in medicine, potentially replacing BMI as the standard measure of overall health. The argument is grounded in something that researchers have been documenting for years. Virtually every major chronic disease, including cancer, neurodegeneration, and cardiometabolic conditions, shares a common thread of mitochondrial dysfunction. Your mitochondria are the energy production centers of your cells. How efficiently they generate power appears to be one of the most telling indicators of where your health is headed, and in some cases, how fast you are aging at the cellular level. The science has advanced considerably in this space. Mitochondria are now understood to perform multiple essential roles beyond just energy production, including regulation of oxidative balance, inflammation, and immune function. Researchers are now exploring how mitochondrial DNA variation and bioenergetic function shape neural performance and disease risk, and how stress and early life experience influence mitochondrial dynamics and long-term mental health. That second piece is significant. It means the energy conversation is no longer just physical. It is psychological, neurological, and developmental. A 2026 study found that apparently healthy sedentary adults already exhibit a distinct and measurable mitochondrial phenotype with impaired substrate transport, reduced oxidative capacity, and constrained metabolic flexibility, detectable through non-invasive testing. In plain language, you do not have to be sick for your energy system to be underperforming, and it shows up in the data before symptoms appear. This is much what we talk about in life energy, getting below the surface, seeing things before they manifest. The inaugural Global Mitochondrial Health Summit is happening June 26th in Sydney, bringing together leading clinicians, researchers, and educators specifically around mitochondrial science and longevity. The fact that this field now has its own dedicated global summit is a useful signal of how fast this is moving from research journals into institutional medicine. From the perspective of life energy and self-awareness work, this is the scientific establishment starting to build the framework for what practitioners in energy medicine have been working with for decades. The body's vitality is measurable. Your energy output is a signal. The question of how to optimize it is no longer fringe. It is becoming clinical. The government dropped UFO files. A Capitol rally is coming, and Spielberg just made a movie about all of it. Let's take some time on this one because the layers matter and the timing is significant. 2 official government releases have happened this month through something called PURSUE, which stands for the Presidential Unsealing and Reporting System for UAP encounters. All of it is publicly hosted at war.gov/UFO. No clearance required. The first drop on May 8th included 158 declassified documents, photos, and videos from the Department of Defense, NASA, the FBI, and the State Department. At least 100 of those files still carried redactions. The materials included pixelated imagery of unidentified objects and official reports from military pilots describing metallic spheres, flying discs, and glowing orbs. 2 weeks later, the second drop came. That release included 6 PDF documents, 7 audio files, and 51 video clips captured from military aircraft, each with a detailed companion description. The standout document was a first-hand account from a currently serving senior intelligence officer who described a series of close UAP encounters lasting over an hour during a late 2025 helicopter investigation. He and his crew watched what he described as countless orange orbs swarming in all directions against the backdrop of a mountain range. In his own words, he was left virtually speechless. The second batch also contained Apollo 12 audio recordings of astronauts describing streaks of light while trying to sleep in darkness during the 69 mission. And one of the videos reportedly shows a UAP being shot down. More is coming. Representative Tim Burchett has said publicly that what is ahead will make the initial releases look like a drop in the bucket, and that people should expect a holy crap moment. Now, here is where the timing gets interesting for your calendar. On June 9th, a bipartisan coalition of high-level officials, lawmakers, and whistleblowers is convening on the steps of the U.S. Capitol to push for passage of a formal UAP Disclosure Act, stronger whistleblower protections, and a call for foreign governments to join the effort. James Fox, the filmmaker who has spent years, you could say all of his life, documenting this space, issued a statement saying, "The public deserves real answers. Congress deserves access, and reality should not be classified." 3 days after that, on June 12th, Steven Spielberg releases a film called Disclosure Day, starring Emily Blunt, Josh O'Connor, and Colin Firth, with a trailer that poses the question, if you found out we weren't alone, if someone showed you, proved it to you, would that frighten you? This summer, the truth belongs to 8 billion people. And he has also come out and said that the movie is true, right? When Spielberg makes a film about something, that topic is entering a new cultural tier. The combination of a Capitol rally, ongoing government document releases, and a major studio film from one of the most culturally influential directors alive, all landing in the same 2-week window, is not accidental. This window for this conversation is wide open right now. The research community's response to the files themselves has been measured rather than celebratory. The framing across most serious researchers has been that data is not the same as disclosure, but the institutional acknowledgement that unexplained phenomena exist and cannot be accounted for by current frameworks is itself historically significant. That shift in the official information field matters regardless of what the files ultimately contain. And that is a very important point. Some of these files, the one being shot down, most likely a balloon, lots of very explainable phenomena. But then also plenty. You only need one. It isn't. Now, here is the deeper question that sits underneath all of it. And it connects to something we hold here on this show, myself. Professor Robert Endres of Imperial College London applied information theory and algorithmic complexity to calculate the mathematical probability of life spontaneously arising from prebiotic chemical conditions. His 2025 paper concluded that the odds are so astronomically low that directed intervention becomes, in his framing, a logically open alternative. His calculations suggest that a minimal living cell requires approximately 1 billion bits of organized information, equivalent in complexity to sophisticated computer programs. This connects to directed panspermia, a hypothesis proposing that advanced extraterrestrial civilizations deliberately seeded Earth with biological starter material to initiate the conditions for evolution. The concept was seriously proposed by Francis Crick, co-discoverer of the structure of DNA, as early as 1973. What is notable is that this is being revisited now with modern mathematical and computational frameworks, and the math is not ruling it out. The implication, if you follow that thread honestly, is that Earth may not be an accidental garden. It may be a managed one, and humans may not be the first tenants. Some researchers in the disclosure space are already suggesting that the legacy archive being referenced in classified programs includes materials that point to a presence far older than modern human civilization. That is unverified, obviously. But it is being said by people who have held clearances. and that matters as a signal even before it qualifies as evidence. The framework that feels most useful for holding all of this is one that a lot of people in consciousness research, energy medicine, and self-awareness work quietly share. It is what you might call the Star Trek hypothesis. The Star Trek model presents a civilization blueprint built on the premise that advanced civilizations inevitably develop advanced ethical maturity. In that story, humanity itself emerges from near extinction, not through its own genius alone, but through contact with a more evolved species that had been observing and waiting. The first contact in that narrative happens not arbitrarily, but at a threshold moment when humanity demonstrates enough coherence to be trusted with what comes next. The Vulcans in that story operated under a principle of non-interference with less developed species and deemed humanity ready for contact only after a specific kind of demonstrated readiness, one that was not just technological, but something more like civilizational alignment. That narrative structure rhymes with several serious frameworks being discussed in UAP research right now. The idea that observation has been ongoing, that contact is conditional on readiness, and that readiness involves more than hardware. It is worth noting that in the Star Trek timeline, 2026 is actually the beginning of a long period of catastrophic conflict. The series frames that as the painful transition humanity had to move through before it was capable of meeting anyone else was mass conflict. It is not a prediction, it is a cautionary map, and it reminds us that collapse is rarely a single event. It builds through choices made long before the breaking point. The disclosure files are real. The math on spontaneous life is shaky. The ancient presence question is open, and the trajectory question, where is this all heading? And are we moving toward it alone? Is the one worth carrying with you as this story continues to evolve. Now let's shift to our next topic today, AI and consciousness. The hard question just got harder. There are multiple research teams right now actively disagreeing about whether artificial intelligence can be conscious. And the scientific community is getting louder about the fact that we do not actually have the tools to answer that question cleanly. Scientists are warning that rapid advances in AI and neurotechnology are outpacing our understanding of consciousness itself, and that this gap is creating serious ethical exposure. The argument being made by a growing number of researchers is that developing actual scientific tests for awareness could transform medicine, animal welfare, law, and AI governance simultaneously. One research team is using competing AI models to study what electrical patterns correspond to conscious versus unconscious brain states, from full wakefulness all the way to deep coma, with the goal of mapping what the brain actually does when awareness is present versus absent. Meanwhile, the Qualia Research Institute is approaching it from a completely different angle. Their framing is that consciousness is a resonance phenomenon rooted in electromagnetic field dynamics, and that silicon chips may be structurally incapable of hosting it because they are specifically designed to suppress the kind of electromagnetic interference that living biological systems may depend on for awareness. That framing maps directly onto what bioenergetics and field theories of consciousness have proposed for years. The machine can simulate the output of awareness. The question is whether it can generate the field. From a self-awareness and metaphysical standpoint, this debate is valuable because it is forcing the question most of us in this space have been sitting with for a long time. What is awareness, actually? Is it a byproduct of complex information processing, or is it something that requires a living, energetic substrata? The scientific community does not have a consensus answer. That is important to know. It means the field is genuinely open, and the frameworks being developed right now in consciousness Research will shape how that question gets answered. Remote viewing gets its first expert consensus methodology. This one moved under the radar in mainstream news, but it matters considerably if you work in or around extrasensory perception research like we do here with Life Energy Research. Published in March 2026 in the Journal of Scientific Exploration, a paper from researchers at Padova University and the California Institute for Human Sciences brought together a consensus survey of leading experts in remote viewing to establish recommended procedures and conditions for obtaining reliable results in real-time remote viewing and precognition tasks. Remote viewing is defined in the research as the ability to access and describe, by mental means alone, information blocked from ordinary perception by distance, shielding, or time. It gained significant attention during the Cold War when it was used in classified military intelligence operations, and it has a documented research history spanning decades. Princeton University's PAIR laboratory documented anomalous cognition across more than 2.5 million trials conducted over 26 years. Wow. With cumulative statistical odds against chance exceeding 1 in 129 trillion. Remote viewer Ingo Swann provided an accurate description of Jupiter's rings in 1973, 6 years before Voyager 1 confirmed their existence. Stanford Research Institute's 20-year government-funded study of remote viewing produced effect sizes that the American Institutes for Research acknowledged as scientifically credible by conventional standards. That data has existed for a long time. What is new is that a formalized framework for methodology, replication standards, and best practices is now being developed by credentialed researchers in peer-reviewed journals. That is the field maturing in real time. One critical finding in the expert consensus is the distinction between trained and untrained participants. When trained viewers are measured rather than untrained ones, results increase dramatically. The comparison being drawn is that measuring extrasensory capacity in untrained individuals is like trying to light a fire without the right conditions. The skill requires development, and the research protocols are now being designed to reflect that. If you have ever done intuition work, practiced sensing at a distance, or used any form of inner knowing in your personal or professional practice, the research infrastructure for understanding and validating those capacities is being built right now in academic journals. The conversation has moved from "is this real?" to "how do we study this rigorously?" And that is the same arc that acupuncture and meditation followed before they entered clinical conversations. Pay attention to this one. Ancient movement practices enter clinical medicine. Leading international scholars, clinicians, and martial arts masters, including experts from Harvard Medical School and Tufts University, have convened to explore and validate the therapeutic potential of Tai Chi and Qigong. The consensus framing is that these practices represent increasingly validated, non-pharmacological interventions for a wide range of chronic health conditions. This is not a wellness conference talking point. These are researchers from major academic medical institutions putting their names behind the clinical efficacy of practices that have been understood by Eastern medicine for thousands of years. There's also a World Congress on Traditional and Complementary Medicine coming up in Singapore, specifically focused on the scientific validation of ancient practices, ranging from Ayurveda to traditional Chinese medicine, with a stated goal of developing more comprehensive, patient-centered models of care. What is happening across all of these developments is that the bridge between ancient wisdom and evidence-based medicine is being built with institutional backing, and it is no longer fringe infrastructure. Meditation and breathwork techniques have been shown through rigorous protocols to influence gene expression and immune function. The energy pathways that ancient traditions described are not metaphors that researchers are now being forced to take seriously. They are mechanisms that are actively being mapped. From the perspective of life energy and self-awareness work, this matters because it validates a foundational principle. The body is a system that responds to intentional input, whether that input is movement, breath, sound, or focused attention. The ancient practitioners knew this through direct experience and refined it across generations. Modern researchers are now building the language to describe why it works. So let's close the loop on all 5 of these topics for the month. Your cells have a measurable energy score, and that score is becoming a clinical marker for how you age, think, and function. The government is releasing UAP files in rolling batches. A capital rally for full disclosure is happening this week. Spielberg drops a film about contact next week, and the deeper question of whether Earth has been a managed planet far longer than human history is being approached mathematically and not just philosophically. AI researchers cannot agree on whether a machine can be conscious because they cannot fully define what consciousness is, which means the field is genuinely open. Remote viewing has just received its first peer-reviewed methodology framework, and the data behind it is far stronger than most people realize. And the ancient movement and energy practices that form the foundation of holistic medicine are entering clinical validation at a pace and institutional level that would have been unthinkable 10 years ago. All 5 of these threads point in the same direction. Awareness is not a soft concept. It is the center of what's coming. And the science, the disclosure, and the cultural momentum are all moving toward the same question. What are we, and what are we capable of? That is the work. That is why we are here. This has been The Holistic Monitor. Until next time, my friends, be well.